Yes, welcome to the Trump Republican Party Freak Show Caucus.
It's the journalists and the Democrats spinning the lies.
The Democrats, the rules don't apply to them.
Republicans all have to robotically repeat Trump's toxic wingnut bullpucky stew.
Ray, Shelley, thank you for joining me for this conversation. Excited to have you here. How do you sort of feel about the media generally, the traditional media? I'm talking about cable news and newspapers.
I think that they are entertainment shows and not news shows. I think that they're providing data with regards to current events, but I think that they are specifically designed to be entertainment shows and filled with propaganda in some cases, depending on what side of the spectrum they are reporting on.
Speaking generally about the media, do you think that the media bears some or any responsibility, or a lot of responsibility, or no responsibility for the political kind of warfare that's going on in this country?
Yeah, I think I do.
Okay. Ray, what do you think about the media, your trust in them, who you trust?
I think that sometimes they present things that are in the extremes and make it seem like it's the norm or the majority. And I don't know if that's necessarily true sometimes. I think people are more so, not operating in those extremes. So then when they present it as if it is the norm, then it's kind of, I don't know, for me, they lose credibility when they do that sometimes.
In our current sort of political, social interaction, how much of the notion of a person's identity, be it ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender, race, how beneficial is that for making a better society, having politics that are more responsive to the needs of different groups, and how much of it is problematic, and if so, why on either side?
I guess it's relative to what the story is. I guess if I think of, acts of violence or either being done by or done to a group of people, that can kind of be done to polarize that group. And so I think sometimes there needs to be a little bit of caution with that.
Caution with what, the terminology, or caution with?
With the identity, because it can be used to kind of enhance their story, or, well, essentially that, regardless of what side they're on. Yeah, I think there can be a little bit more of a, act of caution there.
Let me ask you a slightly different way. Would you consider yourself first, well, I'm a Mexican-American, heterosexual male, or would you say, well, I'm just an American, and those other things are other, they may be relevant in certain contexts, but not in others?
Yeah, I guess I would lead off with, Mexican-American, not so much like, because that's part of who I am, right? Mm-hmm. There's a Mexican descent, but I was born here and raised here. So I think it's fair to kind of lead off with both. But I wouldn't necessarily just kind of limit my identity as American, because I don't know if it tells the whole story as far as, giving somebody a perspective of who I am.
Right. How much do we need the kind of identities that we've been talking about to sort of have politics that's responsive to different groups and needs and so forth?
I think we do need to be aware of the different cultures that exist in our country. I think that many of our laws are based on a typically white culture structure. I think that there's systemic racism that is often built into our system that we have been blinded to until recently, as it's becoming more and more talked about. So I do think it's important to talk about the different cultures that we have and how certain laws and decisions might be negatively impacting them and benefiting other people, just in the terminology and languaging that we use a lot of times. Does that make sense?
Sure. Are we in a better place than we were in 1960 or 1980 right now for how we treat minorities?
it feels kind of hard to have this discussion because I'm very aware of like my color right now and the fact that, my family came over during the American Revolution. Without knowing a lot of our history, I might argue that our political structure is more harmful to quote unquote minorities right now than it was in the past.
In like 1960?
Yeah.
Even with Jim Crow and all that stuff.
Well, I mean, what I immediately thought of was that at that time, prior to Nixon, at least the US-Mexico border was a lot more fluid. And that allowed for farm workers to come up and, have a job and bring back money home. And then they would actually go back into Mexico. And, it was much more of a seasonal thing. And from everything that I have read and been told was that way of doing things actually benefited the Mexican people much more so than it does now. Now it's...
What about for Black Americans?
Honestly, I really have a lot of concerns about how Black Americans are being treated.
But I mean, comparatively to, say, 1960.
I don't know.
What do you think, Ray? Have we gotten better as a country in creating the conditions for equal opportunity for minorities?
I would say so. I think that there's a lot of minorities in positions of power, whether it's in government, business, and I think that's kind of what the direction has been, to get people of different backgrounds into these roles. And I think that, I can't say like, oh, there was so many minority CEOs in the 1960s and then comparatively today there's this many more. Mm-hmm. I guess I could only go based off of what I feel and kind of what I see, right? So in general, I would say yes.
Let me jump back to media for a second and talk about social media. Is certain kinds of speech actually amplified, either by the algorithm or just by virtue of the fact that extreme opinions tend to garner attention, and so people see it and they like it or dislike it? That's one category. The second category is people saying things that you think shouldn't be on those platforms. What would constitute misinformation for which Twitter should ban the user or not allow the tweet to stay public?
I think that if someone has tweeted out not an opinion, but a fact, or they think that they are tweeting out a fact that is absolutely erroneous, then it's really, it's really hard because I do think that, we need to agree that there are certain facts in this, there are certain facts, and allowing for the proliferation of, somebody being able to say a lie and all of a sudden that's the new paradigm that we're living under.
What would be an example for you?
I don't know why this came into my head, but for somebody to say that dinosaurs and humans existed at the same time, or that evolution is not real. And if somebody were to tweet that out, knowing that it's absolutely false, and somehow that gets so amplified that there's now an entire subset of people who believe that, I think that that's wrong. We have to agree that there's certain facts in the world.
What do you think about banning dinosaurs and humans lived at the same time, or evolution is not real?
I'm not saying it should be banned. I'm just saying that it should come with some sort of statement that says there's no factual evidence that this tweet is accurate.
But how do you square that with religious freedoms, if somebody believes that,
I think it's a fine line, because there is a school of people or a group of people that are of that school of thought that, the world is flat, right? Or they at least question it, like, well, why aren't we talking about it?
Well, the world is flat is very extreme.
Right, but
there's a large portion of the population, American population, that would say evolution isn't real because they're religious. If you're an evangelical Christian, to take one example, or an Orthodox Jew, or whatever you may believe as a matter of religious faith, that evolution is false.
So then doesn't that become a form of discrimination because now you're kind of isolating that religious group from sharing what they feel or what they believe in. And that's kind of the that's the dangerous part, I think, right? Because I think a lot of the things that are happening today is in efforts of an all-inclusive, you know, I guess, world, right? So is that causing anybody harm? I don't know.
I think that we have to agree that there are facts in this world, and evolution is a fact. It can be recreated time and time again. It can be proven time and time again. God cannot. I know that that's a very atheist point of view, but you know, if you're just looking at, I mean, I understand that there are some people that don't believe that evolution exists, but I hate to sound so dogmatic about it, but they're wrong. They're wrong. And I think that part of the problem is this, and I know that it's a really fuzzy line to be like, people are allowed to have their beliefs because I want to have my belief and not be challenged on it. But at the same time, there are just scientific truths that we all have to believe. And the fact that we don't, I might argue, is some of the reasons we have all of the problems that we do. Like if we don't have just some foundational core accepted truths, then we are going to run amok.
You're an advocate of vaccines, I would imagine.
I am.
And you've have probably been from an early stage, from as soon as it was approved, even in emergency use by the FDA.
I actually was so pro-vaccine that I'm in a clinical trial for it.
Okay. And what about you, Ray? How do you look at that?
Yeah, I'm unvaccinated, so.
So what led you to that?
I think for me, it was far too early in the vaccine trial to say, okay, I will participate in this. And as I kind of did a little bit more research, I didn't want to expose myself to that, you know, as far as the potential adverse reactions my body could have to the vaccine. Very much a calculated risk. I know COVID is a real thing and it's to be taken seriously, and people have passed away from it, and, you know, families have been impacted by it. So, you know, I want to make that part clear, but as far as me being vaccinated, I just didn't want to.
So I'm sure that it sounds crazy to you, but how do you make sense of the fact that he has such an opposite viewpoint from you?
God, it's so hard because I know that this is going to sound like censorship, but I think that the decades of allowing for an anti-vaccine rhetoric has made it that people distrust the truth about science. I think that, and I would even go further to say that the problems in our education system have made it that, you know, people don't trust science and religion and all of these other things. And obviously for me, science is my deity. I think that we are suffering from accepting that there are just certain truths. And I think that without the foundational support that we could have been building for the last 20 years is what has led to people having their beliefs about vaccines and science today.
Anything you want to say to that?
I would just ask for clarity in the sense that just because I'm not vaccinated does not make me an anti-vaxxer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because I only say that in part because of what I heard you said. And I think that's important to distinguish, because I'm not actively telling people don't get vaxxed, right? For me, that's where you land on the topic. Cool. This is where I land on the topic. You know, is it cool if we order another round of beers? Like, right? So that's the only thing I would say.
That's always cool.
I know, yeah. Right. So
I prefer wine, but okay.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
now we're really having a debate then.
Yeah.